Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Please welcome Linda Stone.
These are my slides. You can't see them. You don't need to. James said the greatest weapon that we have against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. Who does that anymore? Who chooses one thought over another? Is there any one of our species that does that? Sunny Bates claims to do that.
Choices of thoughts over what to concentrate on.
Yeah. Okay, this is very important. So one of the things that I've been studying now since 2007 is the physiology of technology, and it grew out of work that I was doing in studying attention. And people kept wanting me to write, I coined this phrase, continuous partial attention. People kept wanting me to tell them, well, how do we get our attention back? And I discovered that there was a physiology to attention, and that all these directions that were related to make this list in this way, do this, every way to approach it through the mind wasn't ultimately going to be very effective because there was a physiology of attention. And then I noticed one day, sitting at my computer in 2007, that I wasn't breathing. I was shallow breathing, I was breath holding, and I proceeded to do a lot of research at my dining room table using heart rate variability devices in 2007 with subjects who didn't have to sign anything because it was my dining room. And discovered that pulse, heart rate variability, basic physiological measures shifted completely into a fight or flight or upregulated sympathetic nervous system state when people were in front of a screen apnea, or specifically doing email or texting, email apnea. And I came up with these phrases, email apnea, screen apnea. Part of what happens is that you're sitting and you gradually are more and more like this. And you can't get an optimal breath. But the other thing that happens, and neuroscientists will tell you this, is that with anticipation, there's an inhale. And you inhale when you're doing email, but have you noticed? You never exhale, because it's, oh my God, him, oh, I didn't do that, oh, I better do that. Never, ever, ever exhale. If someone comes to your door, inhale before you open the door, exhale, hello. But as a computer, it doesn't happen. And so as I continued to study this, I realized that there was, I sort of started to look around, was there a holy grail of how to breathe? Who could do this? And I discovered that the people who could do this were professional athletes, trained to breathe, trained for performance, professional musicians, dancers. All these people were trained to breathe. Meditators could not consistently do this. People who did yoga, and Belinda and I were talking about this last night, people who did yoga, had a good yoga practice, even a pranayama practice, couldn't necessarily consistently do this. And I started interviewing musicians, and I learned as I was interviewing these musicians that a beginning musician merges with an instrument. I'm playing the violin. Have you seen beginning violinists? They're like, what's me, what's the instrument, how do I stand, how do I breathe? And over time, as they become more experienced, they learn to separate themselves from the instrument, and they don't merge with it. Most of us merge with our phones, merge with our computers as we work on them. And these devices are what I call prosthetics of mind. And the exciting possibility for us, and I realized from My Little Pony that we're always very optimistic about what's possible, and then it kind of sucks. But the possibility is for us that computers can become prosthetics of being in the same way that for musicians, their instruments become a prosthetic of emotional expression because they stay emotionally embodied. And that's how you get all of this back. There are multiple things that happen when you're not breathing. Your nitric oxide balance in relation to CO2 and oxygen is thrown off. And when you have that situation, nitric oxide is considered a hormone, it leads to obesity, depression, inflammation. That's what they're finding with people who are off kilter in that way. You go into a chronic fight or flight state. So even though you may not be in that state all day long, when you do it cumulatively over time, research from the NIH says cumulative breath holding, cumulative shallow breathing leads to this chronically stressed state. One of the things breathing also does is it massages your organs with that inhale and exhale when you're really breathing. And you can feel that when you swim or when you walk and you're moving. You can feel that. So breathing is important, but the other thing that turns out to be really important is what's happening with sitting. And your esteemed paper, the New York Times, has come out with a couple of interesting articles in 2012 on sitting and on the issues related to sitting. And one of the things that has not come up in these articles and that I think is absolutely fundamental is that when you're sitting, this is the major lymph duct here, chyli cisterna, something like that. These are major areas of lymph circulation here. We do cardio exercise, which is all about our circulatory system, and our circulatory system has a pump, the heart, but our lymph system has no pump. The pump for our lymph system, actually, calves really contribute. If you talk to David Blaine, I'm told, he'll tell you that when he does a magic trick for hours on end and has to be still, he is needing to be moving his heels. So the things that help with lymph are walk, stand, calf stretch, qigong, diaphragmatic breath. I call all of this conscious computing. How can we become more conscious so that we can become unconscious, so that computers become a prosthetic of being, digital devices, technologies become a prosthetic of being. And since you're cutting me off, I can't do this stuff on play, which is another 2 minutes. Too bad. But here's what the play stuff is good.
Do you want to eat on time?
Yeah, do you want
We're
to?
going to 3 hours. Keep the cameras off for 20 minutes.
Give me 30 seconds. Just give me 30 seconds, which is, there's a post on Boing Boing that just went up on play that I wrote. But one of the things I encourage you to do while you're here with all these amazing, interesting people is turn to the person next to you or behind you or whatever and ask them to tell you how they played as a child and how they played a day. Write about this. I have something on my blog and talk about it. So,